Welcome to episode 2 of the Project 56 Merc. So today we are going to get a good start on the floors. As you can see, they're rusted out pretty bad. And we are going to get started with the passenger side first. No reason, it just looks easier. So we'll get right at her. What I've done here, I just cut out the rust, but I made sure that my cuts were straight and square. This will make it a lot easier to build your patch. So with that, let's go build a patch. Now I've made up this patch that we need for our first repair on our floor. Now this one here, we've got a double bend on it. Now I know that most people, I've seen $100,000 restorations, and I've seen the floors look like grade 2. Spend some time, do it right. If you take pride in the little things, everything else will be beautiful. So this bend here, this one here is easy to do on a brake, but it's pretty hard to do this one on a brake because you've got this. So all I did is basically just used a piece of 1/2 inch square stock, just clamped her down, and then just took the hammer and beat her around. And that works really well. Now on my patches, I use a satin coat. This is an 18 gauge, so it's a fairly thick one. But satin coat is basically kind of a brushed galvanized. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to grind anywhere where you're going to be welding, because galvanized, it's not very healthy to weld that, and it'll also splatter and make your weld look horrible, give you a little bit of porosity, your little pinholes. Put a couple holes here so that when our next panel comes in, we'll be able to plug weld that. Now the reason I like satin coat is it gives that little extra protection if you're doing a panel somewhere and it's going to be hidden. You don't have to worry about some sort of a coating on it. This will protect it for a little bit longer. Other than that, I think we're ready to put that in, tack her up, get on to the next one. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to put this little piece in here. This is for the battery box. Now, fortunate enough, I had another one to salvage, but if you were to build this, it would take you a little bit of time. But the rust on this is pretty extensive. Chances are you probably won't have to repair this. But I was going to tack that on before I hit the floor. I've got this lower patch all cut out, bent, shaped and fitted. And as you can see here, I've got a bit of a cutout here. That's going to slide underneath the cab mount itself. Now once we get everything perfect, we're just going to tack her into place, and then we're going to weld it up solid. That way the cab corner is supported and it won't move for when we go to the next step. And as you can see here, everything's all welded. I've got everything ground, and now we can move over to the other side of the cab, which is a little bit worse. It's time to tackle the rust on the driver's side today. As you can see, it looks really bad, but really the only difference between a little bit of rust and a whole bunch of rust is the amount that you got to cut out. So we're not afraid of that. We'll just dive right in and get at her. Of course, we had to run into a situation. It's near the end of the day. So the screws coming out of here are, you can see that I can't even barely see these. They're so rusted up. So instead of wrecking your nice fancy screwdriver, what I do is just take like a 3/8 nut like this one. I cut it in half with a hacksaw to thin it down, just to make it a lot easier to weld on. Just throw it over top, weld her on, and then you can use a wrench to pop her off. Let's hope it works. If not, I can always edit it out. All right. Of course, when things go bad, they do. I kind of filled up my memory card before I could weld it on there, but I do promise you, it did work. You just weld that little nut on there, and they popped off quite easily. I had to do quite a few of them. So now, I made this. This is the upper part, and I don't know if you saw the other video, but basically, to bend this, easy to do this in the brake, very difficult to do this little guy. So what I do, basically just clamped on a piece of 1/2-inch stock, took the hammer and bent it over, and it'll work out great. So now I'm going to spend quite a bit of time here getting this to fit. I'm going to cut this out, but I'm going to be a little short, and then I'll eventually just fine tune it. So it's going to take a little bit of time to do this. I'm not going to bore you with that. And when I get all the dirty work done, we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so I just tacked in our little patch up here. That didn't take very long at all. And I've kind of pre-fit this guy, and it actually fits pretty darn good. So what we're going to do is I made sure that the holes line up on our cover here. So it's going to be good. So what I'm going to do, I don't need this whole patch. Just because the patch comes this big doesn't mean you have to use it. So I'm going to cut here because this is all in good shape up here. And I will run it right to the very back because it's a nice spot to weld. When it's all said and done, you won't even be able to see anything, which would be really nice. So 20 minutes to fit this. I'm into this for about 2 hours. Now, it looked really, really bad when we first got started, but in a couple hours, it's looking pretty good. So, years ago, we would have thrown this thing away, but they don't make these trucks anymore. And for a little bit of time that we put into it, it's well worth it. Now, I do have to do a little bit of work on our little foot here, on our mount. Basically, I'll graft in a little chunk of metal here, weld it all up, get it clean. But first, I'm going to cut the floor out, probably take it outside, do a little bit of sandblasting, and we'll catch up to you then. So now, I've kind of got the floor fitting rather nicely. And as you can see, after sandblasting, of course it's almost guaranteed that there's more rust after you sandblast. There's never any less. I've got some repair panels from another truck. I can just steal them from there. Those are easy, half-hour fixes. You can see there that I fixed up the mount a bit. So now I'm ready to tack in the floor pan. So we've got her all tacked up. She looks good, she fits good. I'm really happy with it. So our next step, we're going to weld her up, and we want to make sure that the floor is really well secured. That way it supports the front posts, so when we start cutting into it, it's not going to move. I will, after I get the welding done on the floor, I'll tackle that firewall. And you'll see that at its end stage. I won't bore you with that one. Now, if if you have the luxury of being able to get in with a dolly in behind your weld, after you put a little bead on it, you can flatten it out a little bit with a hammer or dolly, and that'll make life a lot better when it won't do so much of this. What you're doing is just flattening the weld, really just kind of stretching it a little bit. 90% of the time, you know, we don't have those options, but when you do, take full advantage of it. I know you're probably looking like how to get this up here, but I do enough of these cabs that I've got it on a bit of a rotisserie that I built, and it makes life so much better. We're going to be able to buff all this rust up, clean it up, but that's for another segment. I'll show you what I do to prep that, but first we'll get all the welding done. Promised you I wasn't going to bore you with getting into too much detail with this part here that was all rusted out. I had a donor. I got lucky because to build this patch would be really tough. So all I did was basically cut out where I wanted, roughly where I wanted to weld. You just lay it over top, trace it, cut it, and then weld it in. A real simple patch to do. Now you can see that we've got the floor pretty well done. And make sure you grind all your welds, make them look good. You know, that's the little things that make a difference. You know, you don't want to leave your welds, make it look like a grade 2 job. Take some pride, grind everything up nice and smooth. As you can see, we got a little bit of rust here and there. There's a little bit of rust underneath. I'm going to go through that with you guys, what I'm going to do, and get it kind of cleaned up, ready to go, so that we can undercoat this thing. And you know, a lot of times, you know, if you're doing a real quick restoration, you know, you might not want to spend the time to undercoat, but this is what's going to protect your truck. So spend a little bit of time underneath it so that we prevent some rust in the future. All right, we'll get on cleaning up this floor, and we'll see you in the next segment.